frequent budget changes and also where you change the budget in an extreme way, that typically throws off ads.
Hello, listeners, viewers, and welcome to another episode of Commerce Untold. Happy to host Pamela Wagner today. Pamela is the founder of Ajala Digital, a Google partner agency that has helped over 3,000 businesses scale profitably through paid advertising. Pamela, welcome. How are you today?
Thank you so much. I'm doing great. On a beautiful day so far, and I'm super looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, Pamela, we had a short chat prior to the call. I mean, you have a very interesting way of running your business and managing the overall quality of life. So we'll probably have time during the episode to discuss this. But first, I would love to discuss you about, a lot of things relates to probably the advertising world. I know you're an expert in Google and Meta and TikTok and Amazon. A lot of businesses are trying to scale, obviously through paid ads. It's a very traditional way of kick things off, which worked probably much better, right? A few years back. Now it's very, very competitive all over the place. And so how do you see, the changes? Obviously, let's start from the changes of algorithms, obviously use of AI within these platforms these days.
So I may quote one of my most recent workshop participants who said, well, okay, Meta is like helping us automate everything, but really where the success is in controlling certain aspects manually and yourself and knowing that those are there and that you can always untick or tick certain boxes that, of course, the platforms would never tell you to.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be a very sophisticated setup, right? Of the checkboxes, the drop down, just to tweak things up over time. But now this is not where the effort is, right? The effort moves somewhere else, probably to compliance, to creatives trying to crack the messaging, right? So all the overall, I would say, focus or expertise of agencies has changed, and maybe it has evolved uh, around that.
Yeah, it definitely has evolved to doing things quicker and doing more of them. So, for example, with the help of AI, I can quickly research a first good amount of basic audiences that I want to target.
Hmm.
But then it takes typically some knowledge and experience in this field to say, you know what? And besides these classic audiences, I also want to target people who follow certain magazines. I want to target complementary interests. I want to target people who go to certain events because that might fit. So I kind of teach the people that I work with to use AI, but then also to have a certain way of thinking that helps you elevate the output you get.
Yes. So we need to trust Meta that they know our audience better than us, right? And probably they know to target those through their algorithms by themselves. But it's actually a battle between fixing things and scaling things, right? So definitely e-commerce leaders, marketeers, founders, they just want to push hard, right, and scale very, very fast. But probably you advise them to check attribution, to check that everything is configured on track, and probably fix first and then scale. So how do you balance this, with your customer?
Yeah, I would take another example here from a client conversation I had just last week who was running the ads for an online car retailer. And over the last like 3 to 4 weeks, the ads started tanking and she had no idea like what was happening and why. And when we look back, and this is probably the number one reason why ads tank when people try to scale, is she more than doubled the budget from one day to another. Then she cut it back again the next day, and then she like tripled it again.
Hmm.
So those frequent budget changes, and also where you change the budget in an extreme way, that typically throws off ads. So I always tell people increase your budget by like 20% week over week. That's a good rule of thumb where you pretty much can't go wrong. And when you do that, you can then really scale slowly but sustainably and see where might my ads break now. If I was working with like $100 per day campaign budget, maybe I can go up to 300, but then after that, my conversions should start getting more expensive, right? So you can, on the one hand, figure out that breaking point. And on the other hand, what we've then seen work is if people hit that breaking point, to go back to the very basics. So instead of having a, a campaign focused on like conversions, go back to a traffic campaign or a campaign focused on clicks in Google. And what we've seen when people do that is the cost per click reduces by like 40 to 80%. And obviously you get more conversions, even though you're not directly measuring the conversions, because Google is saying, oh, because you're not using our advanced types, you might not be, or our advanced types of campaigns, you might not be happy with the results. They might be too expensive. So we're going to be cheaper so that you, again, invest more money.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and Pamela, you obviously worked with more than 3,000 companies, right, in the last probably 10, 11 years, right? So, how do you see, do you find any patterns of like founders and the way marketeers are managing campaigns? I mean, how they measure profitability, versus those who burn money? And I truly understand the 20% logic that you mentioned. Fully agree, because just all these changes, ups and downs, probably makes a lot of confusion to the algorithms. But what's the process, or what's the best, tips that you can provide to scale in a very, I would say, solid and professional way, but looking at the bottom line and measure profitability always?
So the one thing that has changed over the past like 10, 15 years till today is 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you could run a business just with Google Ads and you would get sales in.
Hmm.
That typically doesn't work anymore. I rarely see a business anymore that can sustain itself on ads. And what we have seen is when businesses are struggling with ads, especially like smaller businesses, it really does help to invest in the organic side first.
Okay.
And for example, with one of our clients who has several massage salon locations, she once she hit more than 100 reviews per location, her call volume went up automatically. And the ads also started performing better and showing a lower cost per conversion. So I always tell people, start small with your budget, see what you can get for that. And don't forget that people find you on multiple platforms in multiple ways and in various ways of engaging with your brand. And that's not just like seeing an ad, that might be hearing an ad, that might be watching a video. So now more than ever, we need to engage people's senses wherever they are. And it's not just anymore one platform. You really got to be present on at least a couple of them in order to also make ads work better for you.
Yeah, I hear this a lot about the organic impact on ads, but why do you think it's important? Why there is a connection between the organic, efforts and progress to the paid media side of things?
So, because now we get more offered than ever, people suffer from an information overflow. And when they see just one ad, they might either forget about it or just don't trust you yet. So when they start to engage with you on various platforms, let's say they read a review, they see your top 3 tips of the day on Instagram and so on, every single time they engage with your brand or interact with your brand, the trust increases. So that when I then actually see an ad, I'm much more likely to convert because I've already come in contact with your product or service in different kinds of ways.
Yeah. So, for example, you say you saw an ad first time, probably a discovery stage, and you probably remember and try to find them on Google, maybe, right? And find maybe a blog or some kind of an an organic piece of content, whether video or text based or even a podcast. This helps you a lot next time you see the ad, and also helps a lot on remarketing, right? To just increase chances for conversion.
Yeah, and even Google published studies where they show, for example, that over 90% of people that end up buying something on the internet have watched a video before about it.
Hmm. Yes.
So watching content that is engaging and where I can see the product or service in action drives up automatically conversions that come from other channels.
Yes. And if we address, Meta versus Google, I see a lot of companies, and brands, they are very successful on Meta, but having difficulties on Google and vice versa. Okay. So can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, I noticed that oftentimes we need to start at the very basics. Like Meta typically is targeting people in situations where they might not be looking for your product. So context based, interest based, and so on, behavior based.
Yep.
And on Google, we have a lot of different campaign types where I also have context and interest based targeting ways that I can use for display ads that are very similar to the ads on Meta or video ads and so on. But what Google has is the search ads, which are those text-based ads. So when I look for something and the ad shows up in Google, that means I'm probably really close to taking an action. So both platforms act at sometimes different stages of the buying process. So I got to be aware of that. The other aspect I've seen people kind of like try out, they running a remarketing campaign on Facebook and they expect the same to happen on Google. Facebook can run with a much smaller remarketing audience than Google. On Google, if you want to work with a customer list, typically I try to have at least 15,000 people on that list. On Facebook, it can be much smaller. So those are some of the finer differences. And then, of course, you really got to understand who am I targeting on each platform, what are the differences, and what's the ROI of each one. Obviously, each one wants to show you it brings you the best ROI.
Yes.
But maybe, using a third-party tracking tool or using some sort of surveys that help you get a better picture of where your customers really find you and where they convert.
Yes, because none of these individual platforms analytics can provide you the whole picture, right? I mean, you need like a triple way of someone to have the full cycle of attribution to a specific conversion. So yeah, that's very important. And Pamela, you also talk a lot about policy violations, right? And that sometimes it hurts even more to e-commerce brands than creative and messaging. And what are some of the policy violation killers that you see, and what are your tips to overcome them?
So connecting from what we just spoke about in terms of Meta versus Google, one of the major mistakes I see brands committing is that they use the same landing page on Google that they use on Meta.
Hmm.
Meta is much more lenient with what you can have on a landing page. Google is a lot stricter with regards to like misrepresentation. So for example, on Google, any landing page that I advertise must have a menu. A lot of people use like one pagers for Facebook ads and then think that that works on Google as well. And then they wonder why the ad gets disapproved. And of course, those are things that Google doesn't tell you. These are things that I know from like working way back at Google, and they still hold true today. So you got to make sure that you have a menu on the landing page. That you give that you give people multiple options on what to click. So Google doesn't like landing pages that only have one call to action button.
Mm. Wow.
And then on the bottom, we got to make sure we have the terms and conditions there. We have eventually shipping policy there, maybe a disclaimer. And a lot of like industries that relate to making money or relationship coaching or any kind of riskier products, you need to have disclaimers there.
Yes. And obviously, if you're in beauty or supplements, this is much also very, very strong because of the active ingredients of some of the components that are included in those products, right?
Yeah. And so if a business deals with products that have ingredients that may not be allowed to be advertised on Google, then typically what we found works well is working with a content first strategy where you might create a blog and a different domain and then you create content and then you advertise that content and then from there you link back to your page.
Yeah.
Right. And then so we have misrepresentation in terms of policy disapprovals that I see most often, and then just ad copy, like capitalization all over, like free gift in all caps. can't write anything in all caps unless it is a brand term for Google specifically. Meta is again different. For Meta, it's Meta accepts that mostly. And Google also doesn't like any gimmicky copy. So like the best off. Google always says, well, who's the best, right? It's very relative. And unless it's like really an official source, you're not supposed to say you're the best at something.
Yeah, this is why those versus articles or those versus ads are very, very powerful, right? Just those comparison. Yeah, provide more context, more data, right? And anyone can make a decision based on, requirements, right? So just more objective view.
Yeah. And so when you're creating the copy for a new landing page, don't just optimize it for SEO, which is the first thing that most people do. Also ask Claude or whatever LLM you use to optimize it to be compliant with these policies. A lot of people forget that. And then it's much more headache to get an ad account, again, approved or active. So consider that when you create an ad, when you create a landing page copy, or when you're about to run ads.
Yeah. So how brands can choose whether to start on Meta or Google? Is it based on their ICP or products, or because both of them can work very well, right? For most use cases.
Yes, and I see most e-commerce brands use both to a certain extent. And once they have maxed out both, I could switch to programmatic. I could go on to TikTok ads. I could go to Amazon, depending on whether I want to sell there or not. So really seeing what role does it play in my overall marketing mix, what percentage of marketing does it really make sense, and when do I need to move on from these platforms?
Yes. Yes. And what are the thoughts on Geo and all the chat platforms these days in terms of, taking a lot of traffic from Google, obviously.
Yeah, honestly, it is what it is. So I'm not saying it's bad or it's good. It is what it is, and it is our job as marketers to work with that. So what I've seen over the last year is we went from less than 50,000 impressions on our own website to over 700,000 in less than a year. And that's mostly because of three things that we did, which is publishing content on YouTube on an almost weekly basis, publishing blog articles, and then adding FAQs. And just doing that continuously helped us show up in LLMs more than I could have ever planned for or strategized about.
Yes, because YouTube is can be fully translated, right? And the transcripts, and it's very easy. How do you see brands launch on YouTube? I mean, it's who's doing that? I mean, who's sitting in front of camera eventually? Is it someone from the management team or some of those experts? How do you scale YouTube quite easily?
I I wouldn't say I'm an expert at scaling on YouTube, to be honest. I mean, we went from like less than 30 subscribers to I think now we're somewhat around like 180 or 190, and that's been over a year. So I don't think I can really speak on that. But even though we have a rather small following and channel, I've started getting messages from people that become future clients that say, oh, I watched this video from you, or I found this video really helpful. So use it as like a how-to channel. Use it to like pre-sell people, to warm them up. Like when I work with companies, I want them to have done certain homework, and the videos on YouTube help me have them make that homework. And then at the same time, when they come to have that conversation about let's work together, it's almost like 100% close rate.
No way, yes. Because you answered most of the objections and we review the content, right? And subscribers are not probably the most important, right, KPIs on YouTube right now. So it's
Nope. I think not on no platform subscribers is relevant.
Mhm.
Um, the Stephen Bartlett, who runs the Diary of a CEO, his team has conducted a measurement of how the channel performs over time. And is it now more than ever? It's all about each unique piece of content. Your number of subscribers doesn't impact anything anymore, except of course that maybe your content gets a little bit more shown, but it's not as much anymore as it was like 5 years ago.
Yes, I mean, YouTube is that the content is evergreen, so it's very, very powerful. I mean, it's definitely worth the investment. So, what are your thoughts on e-commerce founders and marketeers, launching campaigns on CTV or TV, when they need to do that, how they need to evaluate, what are the KPIs that are relevant for this type of channel?
This is typically a channel that we work on with brands when they have maxed out, like Google Ads and Facebook ads. You can run TV ads and Google ads as well as part of like YouTube ads, but you can go way beyond that with platforms, for example, like Mountain, which is Ryan Reynolds' company, and other programmatic platforms. So these are really, really great to establish your presence in a niche market. So, for example, if you're an e-commerce brand in the US, I would not start off with showing my ads all over the US. I would do some research about the top 10 regions or cities where my audience is, and then launch those ads there first. Or if I want to go more, I could go the contrarian way and say, you know what, I'm going to go to the 10 regions that might be the least, mm, have the least number of competitors, or where people have the least access to a service like mine, and then start off there because that could bring me very, very cheap views from the beginning.
Yes, yes. Interesting. So it's not for the beginners, right? I mean, when you exhausted all the effort, probably on the other channels, it's worth exploring this channel as well, but more on a regional level, right, where your target audience is located.
Yeah, and where you can compare the short versus long-term effects. So, for example, we have one client who has an acupuncture clinic on the East Coast in the US, and she did some TV ads, some sponsored segments that we then also used on YouTube. But she figured that the leads she got from the TV ads, which were a lot, were also of much of like worse quality than the ones she gets from like the classic testimonial videos that we run on YouTube, because people had much less context.
Yes.
So it's always good when you run TV ads if you already have a comparison.
A comparison to the type of solution that you have, or for the viewers to have a comparison. What do you mean by comparison?
A comparison to other ad formats and creators that you're running. So you can really assess of what value um that segment is.
Yes, and obviously the quality of the leads that are being generated, right? So, I don't know, I think it's important at this stage to talk about attribution, right? I mean, it's a lot of a lot of companies are saying it's quite broken, and we understand how consumers' journeys are evolving and becoming more complex. What are your processes, and how do you measure? Because sometimes we see that the feedback to the algorithm is not really a good quality, right? That has a major impact on the entire campaign. So it's a major, major issue. Well, what are your thoughts here?
It depends a bit on where the company is based in the world. So, for example, if you're based somewhere in North America, somewhere in Africa, and so on, attribution is typically more accurate than when your company is based in, for example, Europe, because of just much stricter GDPR regulations.
Yes.
So, that's the first aspect to consider. Then I am a classic Google Ads tag manager analytics person. I believe that if you set that up properly for like non-European cases, it does a pretty good job. Now, there are instances where you hit your limits because maybe you have some health regulations and you can't track all your customers or your data properly. And in those cases, sometimes we go with, asking people directly. So don't be afraid with all that AI and tech stack that you have available to really ask your people how they found you. In an online forum, when you talk with them, instruct your staff, this can give incredible insights, right? And if a company really isn't sure whether a channel is contributing to their sales, the the very manual way is to just turn that channel off for a couple of weeks. I typically tell people turn it off for like 4 to 6 weeks, because then you have a little bit of a runway after your ads where you still get some effects for that. But when you turn those off, you very quickly notice, is the channel contributing to my revenue or not?
Got it. Yeah, yeah. Any specific tools that you recommend to implement during this phase?
No,
Mm.
No, because if you have analytics set up and
You know, the doing, yeah.
and you're tracking things right, you have all the data in front of you.
Yes. Yes. And Pamela, going back to the campaign themselves, whether on Meta and Google, I mean, obviously it takes time and experimentation, right, to find what's working better in terms of creative messaging. How do you usually do that? Are you just running um, a number of campaigns in parallel, spend some budget on each and one of them? What is your best strategy in terms of numbers of campaign or budgets that support that process?
So, of course, a lot of it depends on the business type, budget, and so on. Let's assume we have a business that makes 300K a year in revenue, rather small. Start off with a budget of 1.5 to 3K a month.
Uh-huh.
A lot of times I hear people saying, "Oh, you need to spend like 10K or more per month to like see results." And that is so not true. Because if the ads don't work in a smaller capacity, then ads don't work for you at all. And in the beginning, there are a lot of things that you need to test. First of all, is my tracking working? So when we start working with a client, we always want to make sure that the tracking is working. So that's the first focus. And then secondly, we typically keep the setup simple. If it's meta, a conversion campaign or a lead gen campaign, depending on the goal, sometimes could be a traffic campaign. Like now for one client, we have a Mother's Day giveaway running and we got about a week left. And so we said, you know what, we'll go for a very simple traffic campaign because we just want to get eyeballs on that landing page. Yeah? If it's Google, depending on the business, a mix of performance max, search campaigns, maybe YouTube. These days, you can easily set up a YouTube or display campaign without having to be a graphic designer. Google has a lot of like tools on Google Ads that you can use to put together that video or that image ad yourself.
Yeah.
But primary stack or main stack is search campaign, performance max, and on Meta, conversion campaign, a lead gen campaign.
Mhm. Got it. Got it. Interesting. So, Pamela, tell us more about Ajala Digital.
So that started more than 10 years ago after I left Google. And I oh God, I was like 23 when I left Google. And I wanted to see how I could live life on my very own terms to work from whenever, wherever, with whoever, and however. And within 4 months after leaving Google, I'd made more money than my monthly salary at Google. And it came to registering a company. I was like, all right, I guess, if I made it this far, coming from a non-entrepreneurial family, I guess I can figure out how to make this sustainable and how to carry this into the future. So I registered the company, and the word Ajala is from the Nigerian language Yoruba. And I was in Nigeria the first time when I was 18, and my friends there kept calling me Miss Ajala, which means traveler. And so I was like, all right, I'll use that word. I'll add the word digital so that people roughly know what this company is about. And if I ever want to change the name, I can. And 10 years later, we're still here. And we've worked a lot in the last 10 years of helping companies grow with ads, scale with ads across all different kinds of platforms all over the world. There's no industry or business segment I haven't seen. It's incredible with what you can make money online.
Yeah.
So you can wake me up at 2 a.m. and I can set up a whole account strategy for you.
Nice.
It just comes easy.
What's the typical customer or your ideal profile of customers?
So my ideal profile of a customer is typically somebody who makes revenue from the mid six-figure range upwards and wants to grow. A typical flat hierarchy in terms of decision making where things can move fast. And a company where the founder is ready to put this important part of ads into somebody's hands where he or she knows they can trust me. That this part of the business is well taken care of. There's somebody proactively looking at it. There's somebody who's communicating with them, advising them, taking them a little bit by the hand in terms of what to do with their budget there. And someone just being a partner along the business growth journey for them.
And who is usually responsible for all the creative side of things, whether it's videos or, pictures and art and graphics, about that part?
So far, pictures was sometimes us, sometimes the client, depending on what kind of creatives they already have. With videos, so far, mostly the clients did it. Of course, we have been playing around with like AI video created ads and so on. So I'm looking to like add that more and bring that more in. Um, but it's gotta make you gotta make sure it really fits the brand that the client had so far.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. And obviously, videos are powerful and use of influencers, but that's definitely another topic. Great, Pamela. So, how viewers or listeners can find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, of course, like everybody these days. And you can also visit our website, Ajala, Ajala digital.com. And I think we got a bunch of opportunities there for you to connect with us, whether that's watching a webinar, blog articles, freebies, and so on.
Great, great. And anything else you want to add?
Um, if you're really not sure whether your ads are working or not, then there's highly likely a chance for you to improve upon them and to figure out whether ads at this point is really the right thing for your business, or maybe you should focus more on content strategy or optimizing your website or other aspects.
Yes.
So I'm not going to be the person that tells you you have to do ads. I'll be the person that tells you, all right, this is when you should use ads and when not.
Okay, amazing. That's a great summary. I love it. Thank you for sharing that, Pamela. It was really, really interesting. I wish you all the best and good luck.
Thank you so much.